Time to start. Welcome to ARCE-Missouri's 2026 Professionalization Workshop. Today's topic is designing posters for academic conferences. We will be recording this workshop so you can refer back to it not only this year, but for next year's ARCE conference and for the Paris International Congress of Egyptologists, which will be held in July of 2027. We are fortunate this evening to have a specialist in this field who I've been fortunate enough to know for some 18 years now. Um, Jenny Olin Shanahan is the Assistant Provost of High Impact Practices at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts. She's co-edited 11 books, including Routledge's series of textbooks on undergraduate research in various disciplines, and written over 20 articles on teaching and learning, including one specifically on designing academic posters in the arts and humanities. Her scholarship focuses on racial equity and social justice in higher education, high impact practices, and culturally responsive mentoring. She holds a PhD in literature from Marquette University. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section of Zoom and we'll ask them after her presentation. She will be asking for responses, so we will be opening the unmuting your microphones if you want to. At the moment, everybody's microphone, other than the co-hosts, is muted, but we will be opening them up when she's asking for responses from you. We will be monitoring the chat as well, but questions posted to the Q&A are less likely to get lost toward the end of the general discussion. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you everyone for coming out, booting up the computer. I'm sure a cold night in many of the places you're zooming in from, but I'm really delighted to be with you, and it's a pleasure to get to collaborate a little bit with Sarah after lots of years of not we haven't worked together in quite a few years, but it's been really fun to collaborate again around this. I'm looking at some slides for you, but actually my first slide turns it to you. I'm curious about why you're here. Why are you interested in posters? Um, why are you why do you present posters if you do? Would anyone be willing to just kick us off with unmuting and just giving us some thoughts about your your view of this first? Let's see if we can get to type in some of your responses, but maybe that's going to be too hard.
Hi, this is Julia here. I'll jump in and add that, well, I know I have at least one or two students here because I assigned them research posters for my class.
Okay.
And recommended that they attend. But I'm also planning on presenting a research poster at this meeting, the American Research Center in Egypt's annual meeting this year.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons why I like research posters as opposed to a paper is people get to have sort of time to sit with your data and think about it. And actually, I find I get more feedback and more sort of critical discussion with a poster than I often do with a paper because it's such a tight time frame.
Love that. You hit several of the reasons. Thank you, Julia.
Hi, Jenny. This is Clara. I really like posters for a number of reasons. I suppose first off, I'd like Julia said, you get a lot of feedback, a lot more than you would get in, say, a paper session. And I feel like when you're standing by your poster during a poster session and regularly answering questions and talking to scholars, you have a lot of dialogue going on. And I think in some ways that helps prepare you for things like academic defenses later on, or just having a good academic conversation in general. And I think another great asset of posters is they're really good for presenting small projects and that you still find as like useful and beneficial that you want to share, but might be less well suited to a large audience at, say, a paper presentation. Like, for example, the poster I'm hoping to present at RC this year is about one small artifact, and it's a really interesting artifact. And I think more people should be aware of its story and understand, and then maybe be able to make comparisons to other artifacts. But if I were to give a whole 20-minute paper session on just one artifact, that'd be a bit of a stretch, and people might not find it quite as relevant to bigger ideas in Egyptology.
Thanks so much. I love both of those responses because they've got multiple reasons going on there. And one thing that you said, Claire, that struck me was about the preparation for other kinds of dialogue, like defenses or things like that, because some of the colleagues I've worked with who have bemoaned posters have said, well, our students aren't developing those oral presentation skills that they would with a longer talk. But it's a different kind of oral communication skill that's being developed, which is quite valuable in lots of settings within and beyond academia. Thanks. Anybody else?
This is Sarah, and I'm actually interested in this because I am planning on going to the International Congress of Egyptologists next year. And I found out the last time I went, I missed several
Yeah.
presentations because I was in a session giving a presentation myself, and it was a great session, no problems with that. But there was so much else going on. And with the poster, I can have my presentation available to people when I'm not there.
Mhm.
And I can have discussions with people who have seen it, who might not have had time to go to that particular presentation. But I have never done a poster before, so I'm listening to this presentation in a completely different way from the way I've listened to your talking about posters in the past.
Okay, thanks. Well, I really appreciate all of those responses. And you'll see that my reasons for working with posters are very much in line with what Sarah, Clara, and Julia said. Um, I love the accessibility and visibility of the research, like Sarah's saying, even when it's not an active poster presentation, but if your piece is there without, before or after your session, or even having it available digitally, of course, is makes it really accessible. And you can have audiences who are experts and much more general audiences, and they can all kind of interact with your research at the level of experience they have with your topic. I love the conversations that are facilitated around posters. Clara was talking about these one-on-one or small group discussions that wouldn't happen in other kinds of sessions. I like that challenge of communicating efficiently. What are my most salient ideas or points? And then how am I going to represent these in a combination of text and images? The time and space for multiple presentations has made this really practical. I was just part of managing a 2-day symposium on my campus last month with 800 presenters. We had, um, you know, I think 10 different poster sessions. We have 75 posters, all this is not always 75, but I can get to about 20 student posters in a 1 hour poster session, whereas I would never be able to talk to that many student presenters otherwise. Um, and finally, I've found it exciting to learn new skills that have gotten me reading about design thinking, visual rhetoric. How do I condense my argument in ways that'll make sense for this genre? And and that brings me to the fact that it's not like this solves everything, right? We have drawbacks of poster presentations too. Anybody have concerns about posters? Like you really would rather um, hear a different kind of presentation, or you would rather share your work in a different way? Anybody want to share anything there? It's totally safe space.
Hi, it's Julia here. I'll jump in again and
Thanks.
start us off. For me, I think really, if I have a really complex idea that's not very visually stimulating, I
Yeah.
don't know if a poster is always the best. You don't want it to be just like a super ink heavy slide,
Right.
basically. And so, or if I'm not 100% positive yet on where I want to go with something, and I'm like trying to sort of figure it out and using a presentation as a sort of iterative process to have discussions and kind of get feedback and think about it. So that's another thing that a poster isn't 100% great for in that instance. The other thing I wanted to throw out there, which is that I don't think this is actually a drawback of posters, but a drawback, a perceived drawback, is that in some cases, posters have been given as a sort of consolation prize if you couldn't get your paper into the quote real program.
Yeah.
And so there is sometimes in some disciplines, definitely not in all, but there can be sometimes a sort of taboo or a sense that it's lesser than. And so I think, again, I don't think that's a real drawback, but it could be a perceived one.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for raising that, because I've seen that with a couple of professional organizations that they'll have like the student poster session is this own thing, and that a lot of people don't go to that unless they have students presenting at it, because it is seen that way. Jennifer, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I've only done one poster while I've been at Missouri State. And the only drawback I saw was that there were people that were reading the poster and was interested in the poster, but was scared to do any Q&A with me while I was there.
Oh,
And
right.
then with the poster being posted on the wall, if I wasn't there, then any of the audience couldn't ask questions and engage in the information. So that disconnect I see is a drawback.
Yeah, we have to acculturate people to how to go to those sessions, right? Not just how to present posters, but how to be an audience member. Yeah, that's really good points. And Clara.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much. So I guess I had a very different experience the one time I presented a poster than Jennifer. It was at RC 2019 in DC. I had two other co-presenters and we were all undergraduates. We'd never done anything like a conference or a poster before. We were just like flying blind, it felt like, but we had a lot of interest in our poster. And so all three of us were talking to like a crowd of people around our poster for about an hour long. And we weren't exactly prepared for that. My voice got all hoarse from talking in this loud, crowded poster hall. And I would say it's definitely a bit intimidating as a student. And especially if you're a shy student and you don't like talking to people that much, it was definitely a learning curve. But I do think it helps me get some of those skills to like be able to like talk to people at the drop of a hat and answer questions about my research to like 50 different people in an hour. So in a way, it was a bit overwhelming, and I do think I'm a bit more inclined to lean towards the paper side of things if I can, because it's a little bit less overwhelming. You might
Mhm.
have 3 or 4 questions, although you do have to give a 20-minute talk. It's not like this constant barrage for an hour of talking to people, even
Mhm.
if that barrage of talking to people is also a benefit of it. I do think it's a little bit harder if you're a bit bashful or shy, and don't necessarily thrive in very social environments.
That's an excellent point. We often talk about posters with our students at Bridgewater State as a way of entering into academic presentations, because to stand at a podium, at a microphone, or something like that feels just, so much anxiety producing. But you're absolutely right that there's a little bit more control than when you have the talk. You don't know exactly what people are going to ask, but most of the session is what you expect. Whereas poster conversations can go anywhere. And yeah, really fun when it's busy like that, but I can see especially for introverts or, just people tired at the end of a conference day. It's a lot. The drawback that like me, who's in literature, and some of my colleagues have said is really about if this is a field in which we're spending a lot of time in the analysis of texts, how can we possibly represent our research without really compromising the quality or the depth of it through a visual medium? So that's there for sure, but the ways that I think about it are in terms of genre, that each genre of presentation, whether it's a poster or a talk or circulating your research through a paper, has different demands. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself, but I wanted to show you the problem that comes with the text-heavy disciplines. This is an actual poster from one of our sessions last semester, and I do see these from more people than maybe I'd like, that they kind of take the text of their paper and paste it into the poster, maybe with like this one graph like that got here, but I've even seen some with no graphs and no other images, and long sentences and even paragraphs and things like that. So um, the it's because it's taking one genre of the academic paper and trying to like mush it into a different genre of the poster. Um, but the poster, of course, calls for distinct planning, presentation of ideas in ways that are very different from papers and talks, as those who've commented have pointed out. I've found really helpful in my thinking about this Carolyn Miller's work on genre. And she says that the definition of a genre is not centered on the substance or the form of the discourse. We might think of it in those ways, like what does it look like? And that tells us what kind of genre it is. But really, it's the action that it is used to accomplish. So you have a purpose, you have a context, you have an audience, and how those combination of things in each rhetorical situation are coming together defines how you share it. So the poster is not better than a talk or a paper or the others, or less than. It's that it's serving particular purposes and it's bringing about the actions that you have as a goal when you're sharing work that way. Um, I don't know if Leah is with us, but I want to thank Leah and Julia, everyone who shared posters for us to look at. This is one from your field that is a really, really lovely poster. And I want to take a look at it. And then if you wouldn't mind, at least, two people or so, if you could unmute and tell us something that you notice that you think is notable about this poster. And it could be a positive thing, it could be neutral, just something that that stands out to you in some way. Give you a moment just to look it over. Sarah.
Well, I like that there are different things to focus on. I always, when I open a book, I tend to go to the pictures first and then uh, kind of evaluate whether I want to read the book. And I'm looking at this poster and doing that too. And then the boldface tells me kind of how it's organized, as much as the subtitles. But I do appreciate the subtitles. It's very easy to figure out how it is organized. And from left to right, kind of in a circular pattern. It's um, it's easy to follow.
Agreed. Thanks. Yeah, if we think in terms of Westerners reading left to right, top to bottom, then we would anticipate that the most important information is going to be top, maybe center, maybe left, and that's where we've been conditioned to look first. And I like that point about the subheadings and the bold type are kind of directing us to certain pieces of the text. Anybody else, something that you noted about this poster? If not, I can jump in, but I just want to give you a chance. I saw a couple things with this poster that I don't see very often that I really liked. One is just the shadowing of the text boxes. It created a dimensionality there, like it, where it almost looks 3D, that I think is really pleasing to the eye and really creates those clear delineations of sections. There are a good number of images on the poster. I did have questions when I looked at this poster though, because I don't know in the central photo, I don't know exactly what's happening. And so I was wanting a caption or something that would give me some guidance there. And maybe the same with the graphs. I might break them up or make them a little bit larger and perhaps with a legend that's a little larger so that I would know more quickly what I was looking at. But I want to talk about some of the principles of poster design, and then we can come back to this and see what you think after you get primed with some principles here. The poster design basics they're not at all rules, of course, but they're very common and they come out of some of the ideas in design thinking, is that most posters are in 3 columns. Some are 4. I find 4 columns a little busy unless it's a quite wide poster. And the columns would appear underneath the title and the name and affiliations, just as that one from Leah did. And the columns are usually lined up. But just to make the point that these are not hard and fast rules, Leah's poster does not line up into 3 even columns. And I like that a lot. So even though most of them do, there was a real thoughtfulness about how these text boxes are nested in next to each other that works really well. Posters would typically be at least a third composed of images, graphs, maps, figures, those kinds of elements. In some fields, I have colleagues in physics, for example, they tell their students at least 2/3 images, but that's not always feasible in all of our fields. It's a little bit easier for many people's eyes to look at a white or light background with then deeper colors that are coordinated with each other for having maybe some text or some box or what am I trying to say? Shape fills or borders or even text itself. It also, takes a lot of ink to print a poster that's got a dark background. Very different from academic papers, of course, is that the text is usually represented in bullet points and very succinct phrases. And for people like me and probably you who really enjoy writing elegant prose, this requires us to do something different, right? And think about how we can capture a more complicated sentence in just a few words or a bullet point. The text boxes and borders can be aligned consistently, or that there are consistent elements in each of them, just so that there's a sense of harmony on the poster, that there's a theme, if you will, maybe with color and the ways in which things appear. And of course, plenty of white space, and that's underrated, I think. That the eye has some rest as they're looking at the poster. And that helps us to take in the information, actually, if we have some white space to break up the text and images. Some other basics about type size. We usually see poster titles in like the 75 to 100 point type, and then the name of the presenters or names of presenters and their affiliations a little smaller than that, say 60 to 80 point. A nice rule of thumb is for those headings to be in the 40 to 50 point range. And the body text, this is a pretty big range, 28 to 48, 45 point type. I just went through a bunch of posters that I thought, hit it about right. And that's where I was finding most of the body text. I try to do 32 for mine, so kind of right in between there. And then captions, which I didn't see on Leah's poster, but can be quite an effective way. Those can be a little smaller, but I wouldn't go smaller than 20 point type on a poster. You want a person maybe with typical vision to be able to read it, at a couple of feet distance. And then, of course, coordinating the text colors, the fills, and all of that for contrast, as well as for there to be coherence across it. Okay, so with those things in mind, take a look at Leah's poster again. I pointed out one thing that was contravened, but I think quite successfully, was the columns are not evenly spaced. Anything else that if you were going to revise this poster or give feedback, are there anything that, based on those elements, that you would say, oh, maybe this could work? I gave one of them to you, which is that I, as a viewer, would like some captions. Yeah, Sarah.
I just wanted to say that the only color is in the pictures, which makes them stand out.
Yeah.
There's no difference and the seal of California, University of California. Everything else is black and white.
Yeah, good point. It's very harmonious. They're kind of soothing colors too, for easy to look at. And then you're right, the colors in the images then draw our eyes there. Jennifer.
Yeah, going back to the captions, I had no idea what the image was in the middle.
Right.
And Clara in the chat window
Yeah.
told everybody what it was. And I was like, oh, well, I wanted to know that, but I would not have had any idea on where to look to find out what that was. So yeah, I agree with the captions.
Okay, cool. This poster dedicates not a ton of space, but more space than the researcher might want to a bibliography. I think that's fine. This is not, I've seen some that are quite long. It's kind of on the edge where I might say, oh, you could provide a QR code that goes to a bibliography that people could spend more time with. I've even seen people at poster sessions have their bibliography as a printed copy. Sometimes they'll print the poster as an 8.5 by 11, and then on the other side have the bibliography, just like have a handout at the session. Could be a way to give you more space on the poster itself. Clara.
Yes, thank you so much. So that actually is related to a question I've had about posters for some time. I've looked at examples and I've never been sure what is like the right convention on how to cite them. And I noticed looking at Leah's, she doesn't have footnotes here, and I say this as a good friend of Leah Picogram's. We did a poster together at RC once, and we didn't know what the proper manner was and how to cite our facts either. We did have a bibliography at the end, which is why I'm sure she did her poster like this for RC in subsequent years. But we weren't sure, like, because if you do it with footnotes, then it has to be listed in the order of the citations. But if then the bibliography is expected to be alphabetical in order, that doesn't work so well. So I was wondering if maybe you could address what's the proper way to have in-text citations for a poster that gives credit where it's due, but also doesn't mess up your bibliography section?
Yeah, that's great. I've seen a few different things that I think work, but I probably wouldn't do footnotes just because it is like it's for a different genre. And you're right, and people aren't all going to read the poster sections in the same order. People will come at various parts, or they might only read, the abstract or something like that. So some parenthetical, citation appropriate to the field, to the style of the field. And then, yeah, either an indication somewhere on here, like this one's kind of, this is not too large of a bibliography. So I think that it's kind of like right on the edge of where I decide to move it off the poster and draw people there with a QR code or with a handout or both, versus listing it. But I think that's typically the way to do it. This one has the bibliography, but I don't see, there aren't in text like parenthetical citations.
And there's only like a couple of facts that aren't her own original research, so it's not like a super big problem.
Right.
Most of this poster is her original data, but
Right.
for example, um, it's unique among Egyptian records in the first century BCE. And then she's talking about papyri consistent with contracts produced in the 70s through 60 BCE. I'm very happy to take Leah at her word. She knows what she's talking about, but like if it was a paper that would need to be cited, and yeah, I've always been confused how to address that. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Let's look at another one. That Clara is on along with Leah. Thank you so much for sharing these. I'm really grateful. Um, Now that you've heard a few things on poster basics of design, um, what are some things that you notice here that are working, that stand out to you, and or questions that you have? Give you a moment to look. Yeah, Jennifer.
I like how the columns are very straight. They're easily to follow. You just go column 1, 2, 3. That's the logic piece in my brain. The header itself too is very clear and aligned with the columns, but that's a lot of information, and you might run people off thinking that maybe it's too complex because there is so much there.
Thanks. Anybody else?
In the chat, Casey says it feels organized, but everything feels flat. Nothing really pops.
Right. But some of the issue when you've got black and white photographs, right? So I know I was thinking about this and I agree. I like the aligned columns. One thing that can really help is to put some of those blocks of text in boxes and maybe have like a coordinating color something that looks good with the mint green as the shape fill for those boxes. And it wouldn't have to be every one. It's really actually quite effective if you maybe have one box in each column that's containing some text together. And then you could have a little bit more color that way too, where you could frame those black and white photos with some colorful background of just that text or that piece. I was thinking too, there's the captions here, which are great. I like having these captions. All of the photos have captions and references. I think they could be like, you wouldn't even need to say above. You could have that caption a little bit closer to the image, and then if it was all in one box, then people see right away that those things go together. So these are just really like design refinements that I think we're suggesting, but the elements are there. There's lots of images. Things are well organized. Okay. Any other comments before we look at something else? Thanks. The third one, again, our thanks to Julia for sharing. I'll give you a moment here, and I'd love to hear what you like, what questions you have, what you notice.
I'll just jump in, Julia, here and say that I think there's a lot of things I would change. So please, everybody, feel free to critique. This was the first poster I ever did, and I never done one in grad school or had anybody teach me how to do it. So I was flying by the seat of my pants. And so there's a lot of things here I would change. And so I will not be offended in any way, shape, or form. And I want to just make sure everybody feels totally comfortable because I am on the call. But yeah, like I'll just say, like, for example, I really hate, like, I hate these colors now. And I think they're like too bright. Like I think they should be like a little bit duller, and a little bit more cohesive. I think they like clash a bit. And I don't like the like faded. I think it's just if I was gonna do a color, it just have to be consistent. So I think the color going on just like right off the bat is a little too much.
Okay. And let me just say again, thank you so much. I know I said this by email, but I really appreciate when people are willing to have their work, have people comment on their work. So it's like such wonderful like academic humility of like welcoming the feedback. I'll say something that I really liked about this was for the introduction and then the temple section to have those columns be uneven. I actually thought worked really well, but then I thought the columns underneath those maybe should be evenly spaced, if that makes sense, rather than having two levels of columns of different sizes. Like I think it works for one level. I didn't mind the colors, but I mean, I think that's more like personal taste than anything. I liked that it was colorful. So you could say that, you mean you could do that with, right? Yeah, it's fading out a little at the lower part is what you were talking about. But
I was going to say, I like the organization of this one a little bit better, just because the colors, I think I personally like the colors, but that's just like you said, I think that's personal. But I feel like it jumps out, like each section jumps out better and it draws your eye and it draws your attention to that information and the photos. But it bothers me that the bottom columns are not equal, but that again is just I think a personal thing. But I like the organization on this one better. I think it's eye-catching. And I think it draws your attention to where, Dr. Trochet intends you to see. So I personally like this one probably the best of all of them, just because I feel like it just, for my brain, it's eye-catching for me. So
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Casey. Jennifer.
I like the fact that even though there's darker colors and it fades to a lighter color, that the font itself is white on the darker and black on the lighter colors because it helps make it pop.
Right. Yeah. There's decent contrast there. And then and the bullet points are a little bit more accessible when you've got a lot of text than paragraphs. Really great comments. I agree that the way to have three colorful sections and to have some harmony there in that they all have the heading and then an image and then the caption and the bullet points. And then I also like that the very bottom of the poster on the acknowledgments mirrors the top so that you have that piece that runs all the way across at the top and the bottom. I think that's a nice like balancing out of things. Oh, very nice. Okay. In all of these ways that we're designing posters, we're thinking typically of three levels of audience engagement. So they're going to be the people who will just get an overview. So they could kind of walk slowly by your poster, or they might stop and just read the abstract or just read a little bit, or they might stop by when you're not there. So they're just gonna get the first surface level. And then you'll have a lot of audience members, of course, who will be closer and they may spend a little bit more time reading. They may listen to your little poster pitch, your overview. And then, of course, you'll have people who will really engage with you one-on-one or in a small group, ask you questions, go back and forth, and where you can, be digging into some more of your data, for example, because they're getting really excited about it. So when I'm designing a poster, I'm often thinking about that overview audience member. What do I want someone who's going to be a more casual observer to notice from a few feet away? And maybe even it could draw them closer. So I'm going to think about that person and where I'm going to position some of the things on my poster in order to kind of capture their attention. For those who are going to spend a little more time, are there one, two, three ideas at most that you hope they would capture, before they walk away? That they've got a concept or two from your poster. And then finally, someone who's perhaps an expert or just super engaged, what would you want them to know that would be really exciting and that would, really sustain their interest in the discussion? So thinking about all of that at once, I know is a lot, but that is, I think, some of the fun of the poster design. And we can address those different kinds of audiences by, of course, what we're including in terms of the sections that are both text, and some of these include images. So a lot of people do include their abstract on a poster. I didn't see that in these three examples. I don't think an abstract has to be there, but it can be helpful for, like the example Sarah was talking about before we really got going about people who could view her poster when she's not even there. So they might just want to read the abstract. Many posters will have some kind of introductory piece that provides some context or that explains what the problem was or what the impetus was that drove this research. Most posters will include something about the methods, process, or approach that was taken. if there were theories guiding the work, frameworks that really defined the approach, that those might get some brief definition, at least citation on the poster. Of course, the results or the key findings, and I put that purposely in the middle of this slide because it is a place where our eyes are drawn. So you might want, if your results or your findings are really important, then you might want to put that in a privileged place, either the top or the middle. The significance, conclusions, implications of the research is often there. And then these pieces on the bottom are less significant, and you don't even necessarily have to include key points from a literature review, but some people do, especially if the literature, if that's really robust part of the research. You might just want maybe some key theorists or authors and the points that you drew from there. But I would position that in a less privileged place on the poster, probably toward the bottom. Acknowledgements are often at the bottom. They're very important, but they are not the meat of the research itself, of course. And then, like I indicated, either a short bibliography, or if it's quite a long bibliography, better to just have people scan a QR code. Then as I'm working with my students, and I remind myself, I have a draft of a poster, and then these are some of the questions that I ask to guide the revision of it. I ask about the logical sequence and structure. So it might have worked better to my results might fit better in the bottom right, but if I'm worried about that getting lost or not seeming like it's going to make sense for someone who's reading top to bottom, left to right, then I might need to rethink some of the sizes of text boxes and things like that to structure it better. Really trying to find some consistency in the font, style, size, like the body text being the same size throughout is helpful. Often the width of the text boxes being consistent. Almost always needs more white space. So where can we create some of that? The jagged edges on posters sometimes make people want to fully justify the text, but you know how that can be weird too, with spaces that are too big. So it's something to consider. But sometimes just putting that in a box helps it to look less jagged. So it's not just hanging out there in the white space. Are there enough images? Do I need to find more? Are they captioned? And then can I read the most important points at 5 feet? That's often what's given as a guideline for poster presentations, though it sounds like Clara has been in sessions, and I have too, where it's packed and people are much closer. So you can kind of take that with a grain of salt, but somewhere, from body text to headings between the 32 and 70 point type is typical. And actually, these 3 posters that we've been looking at all were using type sizes in that range. And I think that was quite effective. Okay, one last time to look at Leah's with those things in mind. If you were going to revise this, besides the things we've said, we would add some captions. Is there anything else that you would revise?
Julia here. And I say this also as well as someone who knows Leah well. I think as much as I said I hated the color in mine to some degree, I think maybe adding a little bit of color could be nice here to maybe draw attention towards, the conclusions or something like that, or somehow sort of draw attention maybe to those, or put the conclusions in the middle or somewhere to sort of make them a little bit more highlighted, perhaps.
Great ideas. Thank you. Jennifer.
So I'm a graph person, and I can't really tell what the graphs are trying to tell me
Right.
because the keys at the bottom are so squished and so small. It would be almost better to make the bibliography a QR code as you suggested, and then maybe have two rows, one for each graph, just so you can expand that information out a little.
Very nice. Totally agree. Okay, those are great suggestions. So I hope that's helpful to like look at it a few times, consider some of the common elements, and then come back with, fresh ideas. I also wanted to know more about those graphs, so don't be afraid to let them take up some space on a poster and have the guidance of the captions for those. And I like the idea. I was agreeing with Sarah that the consistency of like that kind of tan um, beige color is, and then the black contrast of the text, it's harmonious. So I like it, but I also could see like was suggested that some other colors could be used. They could be colors that go nicely with each other. But yeah, a few different options there. Well, how would you revise the Magic Lantern Slides of Egypt poster, given some of these ideas? Maybe we talked enough about it. I was going to say, I
I'll
think,
jump in and say we could add drop shadows to things to make it look less flat.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for the helpful feedback, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. And like I said before, maybe having some of the things boxed to help um, kind of keep like ideas really clearly together. Sarah.
I just wanted to say I'd like the photograph of the color photograph to
Mm.
be a bit larger, and that caption underneath it. I don't know what to move around to make that possible, but I think that gives a very useful pop of color to it. Um, the other thing is perhaps put that on the right side because the only other real pop of color is the flare on the image just above it. So all the color is on the left side, and I'd rather see it balanced a little bit.
Very nice. You're talking like a designer. I love it.
I worked in an art department for
Yeah.
30 years.
That's very nice. Good. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's more to say here. I think we made some really good suggestions here. Um, but anything that you're thinking of now as you're coming back to it, don't want to cut it off too soon. If you have ideas.
I'll just jump in and add that this is, I think I would probably now, I do in-text citation and I have like I have a little mini
Mm,
bibliography underneath the in-text citation part.
yeah.
And I think part of it also is that like the technology has changed since I did this. So like QR codes are so much more accessible that I think I would probably lean towards in-text parenthetical citations and then like a QR code for the bibliography. Because I do think that, you know, I don't know, I think the ink to white, sort of ratio, the more you can kind of get off the page, I think that would make it a little bit cleaner. And I think I would really try to bullet point a little bit more the sort of meat of it, so that way it's a little bit less dense in some of those places.
That's great. Love it. Yeah, I think the bullet points that are there are it's great to have them bulleted and then they could be even more succinct, so that more of them are one line or that there aren't 3 lines per bullet point in some cases. Clara.
Yeah, so I have a question for folks like Julia who are like specifically an RC audience. I guess as an Egyptologist, I'm a bit concerned that some people might not like the idea of a QR code bibliography. If you were, say, in the contest for best student poster, do other Egyptologists in the group think that something like a QR code or a separate bibliography would be at all frowned upon in a contest, or do you think it would be all right and permissible?
That's a really important question.
I'll jump in a little bit there from the RC standpoint. I'm chair of the annual meeting committee. So to that end, I don't remember what our specifics are. So I would look back at I would look back at the requirements. But that was actually a question I raised. And so not to like force the conversation forward, but in the Q&A, I kind of asked a question to that point, like in this day and age of technology. And, I remember there being a power or a poster once where somebody had a QR code to like 15 other images or like a slide deck, you know what I mean? And so like at what point are we quote cheating? Or like I remember somebody having like layers, so they had like pieces of paper at different lengths sort of on top of each other so you could like pull them up and then like read more information or see an image underneath. And so it's like at what point are we going beyond the poster in what its sort of parameters are supposed to be and the succinct nature that it's meant to sort of force us into for like, which has its own purpose. And yeah, so I think it kind of goes together. Like, and I think Clara for RC specifically, I would have to double check. So let's not quote on that one. You may need to have the bibliography. I know in the past people have had QR codes, but I know you need a bibliography. I just can't remember if it has to be like on the poster itself.
Okay, that would be helpful to know. Yeah, there's it was like just kind of becoming popular right before the pandemic, something that the creators were calling Posters 2.0, where it had very little text on the actual poster, but maybe the most provocative points to try to draw people in, and then QR codes that went to significantly more information. And I saw that at a couple of places, not everyone by any means, just a few people. And then I didn't see it anymore when we kind of came back to going to conferences after the pandemic. So it's a good question, though. I mean, you run a risk if you put too many of your pieces off. I think the QR code is for the people who are maybe they have the same expertise or they are like potential collaborators or things like that, where you really want to dive into things more deeply. But it shouldn't mean that the everyday audience member needs to be accessing the QR code in order to get the gist of your research, because you're right, it's kind of defeating the purpose. Um, I wondered so we've talked a lot about the poster itself, but there's also the conversation that happens there. In your experience of being at poster sessions, what do you think works well? I mean, you're also welcome to say things that you thought didn't work particularly well. Like, I think it might have been Clara. No, somebody else was saying that there was an experience of maybe the audience not really engaging. So they weren't kind of doing their part of generating conversation. But have you seen other things as you reflect on having gone to any poster sessions that you thought, oh, this really engaged me, or maybe not?
I think the space matters so much in this context. And this is something that I know we've struggled with at RC as we've had posters in different places and like we want to have them in hallways where people will see them, but then those hallways can also become really crowded when we have a designated poster session. So trying to find a space that people are going to be passing by and sort of seeing and is sort of very popular in terms of where people are moving through, but then also has a very easy sort of mobility, capacity for people coming in and out and looking at things, lined up in that way. And so I think some of the best have been where you have like a room kind of off to the side that maybe where booksellers are in the middle or something like that, and then posters are along the wall and like a big room. So that way you can really sort of like circumambulate the space and there's like a clear sort of rhythm and motion to it, that allows, and then also just not scheduling it at the same time as like the happy hour or
Right.
as like the big keynote lecture or something like that, which I think is also sometimes a challenge.
Yep. I was just thinking that, like, I've been to quite a few things where like that was the cocktail hour. And so I felt really bad for the poster presenters because people were socializing with their friends they hadn't seen since last year's conference rather than, talking to the poster presenters. Yeah, Clara.
So something I've noticed, when we did that one poster on Magic Lantern slides, we had the crazy idea to order a bunch of custom made postcards and then we pinned a bunch up on the poster itself. And during the poster session, we were handing them out to people who'd come by, and people would come over and like approach us because they wanted a postcard with one of our pretty digitized Magic Lantern slides on it. And I think it really helped get people to come up and talk to us because they wanted to be handed a postcard. We also had like a tiny little plastic photo album of images we had scanned that we wanted people to see but wouldn't possibly fit on a poster. And we just wanted to give them a bit of a taste of this is what the database is going to look at. And we pinned that to the board as well. And when people were coming over and talking to us, we each had like a little tiny plastic photo album with some of our scanned images printed out. We could flip through them and talk to them. And if one of their sites was in there, they were really excited about it. So I think that helped. And then I've also seen people bring business cards and like pin them up next to their poster for like networking purposes. And I thought that was a really great idea. So next time I do a poster, I'm gonna do that. Things that didn't work well. When I did my poster, I did not wear comfortable shoes and I was standing for a very long time.
Yes.
And then by the end of it, I had to like carry my shoes and like walk in my socks back to my hotel room. And I skipped the keynote speaker because it was just like, my feet are too painful right now. We're not doing that tonight. So yeah, that's what I've had success in, and a cautionary tale about footwear too.
Perfect. I know that's great when we have meetings with our students about who are going to conferences. I always talk about their shoes at the poster session because those of us who've learned the hard way know, yeah. Yeah, yeah, whatever makes you comfortable to be able to have the conversation. I love your ideas too of the ways that you can engage people in multiple ways, by having a little photo album, by having the postcards. I love the postcards because they get like a token of your appreciation, but it's also like a host gift or something, like a party gift. Like that, yeah. Most people know that the poster talk involves like about a minute elevator talk. If you have multiple presenters, you might have like each of you have a 30-second part that you've kind of planned out ahead of time. And that I have seen some people go on a little too long there, where it's like I'm maybe I'm trying to see other posters and I can't quite break away because I'm going to like rudely interrupt them. So it is nice, especially in a big session, to have something that you're ready to go, and then you can give people just that much if that's all they want. Um, it's really helpful if you don't know the audience or, I mean, the kinds of conferences that you're talking about, you can assume, of course, that all of your audience members have experience with the broader topic. But you might ask what their knowledge is of your specific topic. So I'll often ask at like a multidisciplinary conference, I might say, you might ask someone, how much chemistry, do you have in your background or something? And then they can reply like, I haven't taken chemistry since high school, or, I'm a chemistry professor. So we can gauge that and to have some preparation ahead of time of like, these are the kinds of things I'm going to highlight for people with less experience. And then these are the kinds of things I'm going to dive into with people who are real experts. Um, some of the most common questions, at least that I've seen at poster sessions, could be, what was the most significant finding, or what got you interested in this, or what inspired this research in the first place. So to brainstorm based on your topic, what you think people are going to tend to ask about, so that you have some of those prepared, of course. And it's fine to be very active at a poster and point to places on the poster, kind of direct people's eyes to different parts and kind of like lead them through it, if you will. And that could give you a chance. I've seen very effectively, you know, like graphs, like we saw on one of these poster examples, that could give you a chance if you're going to say, let me tell you about this graph or this table and why this is really exciting. And I've gotten so interested in somebody's bar graph because of the way that they've guided me through it right there at the poster talk, that I'm like, oh, there's such great potential in various elements of your poster to draw people in and really like, this is what I want you to focus on. The last piece I have, I didn't know if we necessarily needed. Where am I? Why isn't it going? Was just really quickly, if you haven't designed a poster before, some of the just like the practical basics, you can use PowerPoint or Google Slides equally effectively, and you're just creating a blank slide essentially, but starting with the design tab to size it from the outset, scaling it up so that it's going to everything, sizing it later, as you probably can figure out, will cause problems. Things will be overlapping and cut off and things like that. So you set the size and scale it up, and then you're just adding. I like having the ruler and guides there so that I can keep the columns straight. And then you're just adding text and adding images, adding shapes, and then playing around with the design. So, and there's lots of templates online, many of them that you can adapt. If you're brand new to it, you might want to start with a template and make it your own in terms of color and some of those decisions. And then as you get a little more comfortable with it, you might want to um, be creative yourself. Okay, so that's what I have for you. And now I want to hear about, oh, pointers for Canva. You made them in Canva. Yes, I've only done that once. Um, so I'm sorry that I didn't have that prepared. I only did that once. But um, I pulled it up and could only find an 8 by 11 size poster. I'm not sure what that is referring to. But do we have questions?
I have a couple here.
Okay.
Julia Trochet says, I tried once to put up sticky notes and pens around my poster that my students were presenting so that people could leave notes in the day leading up to my poster talk if they couldn't make the actual session. Unfortunately, people didn't really engage with that. I think they weren't sure what to do. But have you seen other successes in dynamic ways to allow people to leave notes, give feedback, etc., either in physical form or digitally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it digitally in terms of I was at a conference in Portugal in the fall, and they had a QR code that brought you to um, essentially submission form that had each of the posters and then places where you could just enter in comments that the presenters would see. Um, that it was open during the actual poster presentation as well as then during lunch when people left that so that you could, keep adding to it. Um, and then of course all of these online platforms for presenting posters or talks or anything else. At my university, we have a subscription to Forager One Symposium. And so students upload PDF of their poster and people can comment, and then the comments are automatically emailed to the presenter so that the presenter then can continue that conversation through email. And that's been really fun to see that, you can see. I'll go online and maybe do like 5 posters a night and give comments over the time that those are open. I had a colleague who used the post-it notes, so the in-person old school paper, but she was there at the time and then was kind of like guiding people to what she wanted. Like, I'd love, your 1 to 3 words of what your reaction is to this. And then she was actually going to doing a little bit of a research study on the like thematic analysis of what people put on the post-it notes. I like the idea of a way that people can interact with you when you're not there. But I can see, yeah, it I might, I mean, I would leave a question and my email address or something, but I could see that maybe that's a culture that's not quite, active yet. But maybe you could ask people when you are there and then, or maybe put some up as decoys, like so people see examples and maybe they'll be inspired.
That's a really good point. The yeah, decoy, like set it up with some comments and questions ahead of time is really smart. Can I ask you to repeat what is that the online program that you've used? And I assume
Yeah.
it's a cost purchased
Yeah.
program, but
So the company is called Forager One. I'll put that in the chat. Um, and then they have a few different products, but the online conference product is called Symposium. Um, we pay for 4 events a year that I want to say is $4,000 for the year. And we can have an unlimited number of presenters in those 4 events, and they can be live, online, fully asynchronous, or a combination. Um, I like how they look a lot. In fact, I might just be able to pull it up um, while we're talking and show you how it appears for the audience because I really think it's attractive. Um, yeah, I can see I'm going to share my screen. So this is from our student symposium in December. Um, their posters or video stills appear as this little thumbnail image, and then their title here, their names, their abstract, the beginning of their abstract is shown. And each time you go in, it's in a new order. So if you just start at the beginning, you see something different every time. But you can also search by a particular subject area or by keywords or things like that. But if I go into it, oh, and this one happens to be a video presentation of a slideshow. But So that's what Forager One Symposium looks like to the audience. And then if I wanted to write a comment, I'd write it down here in this box and then post it. And then these are the comments that were already posted for this student's presentation. Okay. But yeah, there's lots of, I know people at my university have said, oh, we should build our own so we're not paying this expensive fee each year. But they do have I think it might be $1,500 just to do one, like a one-off rather than an annual subscription.
The next question we've got is a good one. What are the best and most cost-effective places to get a poster printed if you don't have access to a university print shop?
Mhm. Yeah, they're expensive. So, right, a university print shop will usually do it at cost, which might be $15 or something, just, Um, if you go to someplace like FedEx Office or Staples, I've paid $80 pretty consistently. And so that's exorbitant. What I found in the middle was a small business. So like a print company that's not part of a big national chain. That's actually at Bridgewater State, our little university print shop can't handle 500 posters in a week's time. There's one large format printer, and it would be going 24 hours a day and still not get them all done. So we actually go to a local business, and they do them for $36 each, um, less than half the price of the national chains. I've seen the digital boards of the posters. I hope that those would come down in price. Oh my gosh, I would love that. The poster printing, the waste of paper and all those resources kills me every time. But we've looked into the digital boards and renting those or purchasing those, in both options were just not even close to our budget. I don't know if anyone else has found anything.
I have one question which is not in the Q&A, but is there the people who come to the American Research Center in Egypt all speak English relatively well, and that includes the Egyptians. At ARCE, for example, the uh, International Congress of Egyptologists, there are a tremendous number of Egyptians there, and Arabic is read from right to left. Is there any way to organize it just top to bottom or something like that that takes into account, even if it's in English, that the organization of it is more uh, intuitive for somebody who doesn't read from left to right?
That is such a great question, Sarah. That is not something that I have any expertise or experience in. I love that you're thinking that way. And I'm envisioning almost like if you could try it, and then I feel like that would be a scholarly piece in itself to kind of like show an example of using Western text with Eastern ways of reading, or things like that. But and I think if you organize it that way, I think it would be really neat to make that clear to your audience what you were doing. Just it'll have people thinking about it in a completely different way. So I saw Clara's question about flying with a poster in a tube. You cannot check it, in my experience. You have to have it. That's one of your carry-on pieces. Goes in the overhead bin. I don't know if anybody else. Have you seen the posters that are on very thin fabric that fold up into a little tiny, like the size of a handkerchief almost? Um, they're super expensive. You can get those at FedEx office. They're over $100. But if you were flying internationally, that's the way to go. It's like this, um, very, very foldable in fabric. Yeah, printing at the conference site. Yep, that's what I've done too.
Particularly flying internationally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are there other questions? No, if I,
Uh,
okay.
I'm just going back through the chat. There's nothing more in the I think Julia was talking about the logistics of engaging with things, but she asked that question. Um, I guess the one of the things is to be very careful and read the guidelines for poster submissions so that you know what you're getting into.
Mhm.
And hope that there are poster submissions guidelines.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I've seen this so many times where people printed posters that were so large they were like curled around the other, the sides of the board, and then the people who had the other side of the board weren't very happy about that too. So yeah, most places will let you know what size you're pinning to, or doing those Velcro sticks to. And we just, at least at the sessions that I organize, will provide a template that's in a size that fits. And then we'll say, you're welcome to do something else, but please make sure that it's within these dimensions. Okay.
All right. Well, I think probably it's time. We've had a really good session, and thank you very much, Jenny. So thank you, everyone. Clap virtually for her. I see a lot of clapping hands going on. To remind you, this presentation has been recorded and will be posted on RC Missouri's YouTube page within the week. Um, just search for RC-MO on YouTube, and you will find this past lectures, professionalization workshops on a variety of topics, and a wonderful series called Playing in the Past about video games that deal with ancient Egypt. And as I said, this lecture will be posted within a week on the YouTube page. So if you haven't seen it, or if you know of somebody, or if you haven't taken all the notes that you wanted to, my pages are like 3 pages long of notes. Um, if you want to see it again, it will be there. Or if you know somebody who wanted to make it but couldn't, it will be posted. So thank you very much, Jenny. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Sarah, for the invitation and the introduction to the organization. And a big thank you to all of you for your engaging, you're engaging with us and critiquing the posters or giving feedback on the posters. And a huge thank you to those who said, you can use my poster, because that made it much more relevant. So your posters were crucial for this presentation. I'm really grateful.
Leah did join us briefly.
Oh, okay.
So, but anyway, thank
Thank
you very much. And thank you for participating in RC Missouri's workshop. If you want to join RC Missouri, we are happy to have you.